Ms. Guy Haas. Thank you for attending. We're going to talk about what it means to right-size your inventory of CAD, CAE, EDA, PLM licenses. I'm the president of Team EDA, and I come to this meeting with, well, Team EDA is a 15-year-old company that's been specializing in this area, but on top of that, I've got another 35 years of experience in this field of engineering software management. So we're bringing a lot of expertise to this topic. A little bit about Team EDA. We're located just north of Boston. We've been in business for 16 years, and we have one focus: software license management for engineering applications. So today we're going to focus on how can you reduce the cost of expensive engineering software license. We're going to talk about right-sizing, various factors to consider. I'm going to give you a really brief demo of a tool that we have called LAMUM, which allows you to manage the inventory and to collect usage data and that kind of thing. And then we'll have a QA session at the end. But what we're really asking you to consider here is an innovative way to manage engineering software. Questions that you may have about engineering software: what applications do I need? I'm sure you already know that, but the question is, do you need more or less of that application or different kind of application? How many licenses and seats do I need? What restriction type do I need? And by this I mean we're talking about floating licenses as opposed to node locked. The floating licenses are always under some kind of restriction: WAN, LAN, and there's variations thereof, and the price of the software depends on the kind of restriction. Can I get more efficient use out of what I already have? Are there tools that are not being used? Should I consolidate my license servers? Considering if you have multiple license servers, maybe you can consolidate those. Or maybe you need to expand the number of license servers. We'll talk a little bit about that as well. Can I get a better deal with my vendor? Everybody's always interested in knowing that, and that lot depends on how much information you have on the vendor, their history, and how good of a negotiator you are. Another question: how can I consolidate and share information about my licenses and vendors throughout your company? So here's some of the factors I feel you need to consider when you're trying to determine, how many licenses do I need? You have to start with knowing what you have. What does my current inventory look like? What is the cost per tool, per seat? What is the restriction of use on the tools that I already have? You may have some that are node locked. You may have some that are local area networks, some that are WAN US, WAN global. But you need to know all that up front. And then who is responsible for what licenses in your company? Another consideration is how many vendors are you dealing with? Is it one vendor or several vendors? What is the renewal dates with each of the vendors? Keeping track of this information is pretty important. Do I need to have the vendor PO information readily available? And do I have access to that information? You need to be aware of your past and current budget and being able to predict what your budget needs are going to be going forward. You need to know how many engineers you have using what applications. Where are those engineers located? What is the staffing trend? Unfortunately, today there's a trend down, so that kind of puts more stress on how many licenses do you need in the future if you're trending down. If your company is growing and you're trending up, then that puts another perspective on how many licenses do you need now and in the future. What tools are needed by each engineer? Each engineer, depending upon whether they're mechanical, electrical, or what kind of engineer, they may need different types of tools. And what tools are needed by each of the engineers? Those questions have to be asked or answered. How many license servers do you have? How many, where are they located? And who are the sysadmins? If you have license servers located all over the world, you need to know who the sysadmins are for the local license servers in case it goes down. And then how many license daemons are running on each license server? And are there opportunities to consolidate license servers? So these are all factors to consider. But probably the biggest factor to consider is what the usage is by tool, by feature name. So in this world, you buy tools, the vendor sends you a license file full of features, and we track usage by feature. Sometimes the feature is a specific tool, sometimes it's just part of a tool. You need to be aware of that and make sure the feature names are easy to read. Sometimes the feature names are quite complicated. Feature name is given by the vendor. Sometimes it's easy to understand, sometimes it isn't. So under the category of usage, things that you need to be aware of are peak concurrent demand. And so there's a couple key things here. Concurrent implies that you're floating licenses, and it's like books in the library. How many do I need to meet the peak concurrent checkout demand? You're going to need to know that. You're also going to want to know checkout patterns. Are people checking licenses out all throughout the day, or just if people are, at a different time zone, you might have staged usage across multiple time zones, and that might require a different pattern or a different number of licenses or different number of license servers. This thing called a heat map is just the way that we can look at checkout behavior and see patterns of usage. Those are important factors. Average checkout time per license. It may be 10 minutes, it may be 10 hours, but you need to know what is the average checkout time for your applications, for your tools. And do you have people that are checking out licenses beyond the average checkout time? And if so, how much beyond the average? Might imply that you have somebody camping on licenses or hoarding licenses, but knowing what the average checkout time is pretty important. Some people like to focus on denials. Denials simply implies that you've run out of licenses, and you'll get a denial because there's no more books in the library available, no more licenses available in the pool, and that triggers what we call a denial. And there are things called true denials and false denials. A true denial is due to not having enough licenses. A false denial can be many other reasons that you can't get a license checked out. And then you need to, as a company, decide on what is an acceptable probability of denial. Zero probability of denial is very, very expensive. Having enough licenses so that there's always enough for everybody is very, very expensive. So you do need to calculate in your estimate on how many licenses you need an agreeable probability of denial. Generally, that's around 5%. A 5% probability of denial is acceptable. But you, as a company, need to determine what level is acceptable. The issue of license hoarding comes up from time to time. You get an engineer who will camp or hold a license even though they're not using it. They want it when they're ready. They want it, and so they hoard it. They don't check it back in. And if that happens, that means you may have more licenses than you need just to accommodate that individual. So you need to know if and when that's happening, who is doing it, so that you can stop it. And perhaps you can get what we call a long checkout alert. So if somebody exceeds the limit, you can be notified and deal with that hoarding problem right away. Otherwise, you're going to end up with a lot more licenses than you need. Engineer productivity is a clear issue. Everybody's trying to get more out of each engineer. So giving them what they need and having them not sit around waiting for licenses is very important. Is there a way to notify the engineer when a license is available if they are all checked out? We want to do what we can to make the engineers more productive. Knowing what's not being used is also very important, because you may be buying tools that are not being used, and this could be huge. And so being able to see what's not being used in the last month or 3 months or 6 months or whatever the case might be at renewal time, don't renew that tool and save some money for your company. So looking at the zero use data is very important. Another factor might be, do you have power users? Do you have users that are tying up a very expensive WAN license? So in the world of floating license costs or pricing, the most expensive license that you can get is a wide area network global license. Anybody in the world can use it. That's going to be the most expensive license you can get. And then that goes down to like a WAN, maybe US, or it might be a local area network license, or a node locked would be the cheapest. So if you have a power user that is using a global WAN license, you need to know that, because that's very expensive. You might want to get that power user a local area network license, or even maybe a node lock license. So these are all different ways of evaluating usage to determine what your needs are. So here's a couple of thoughts on solution to the problem. So there's really two different problems here. One is being able to create and share information about your license inventory, about your renewals, your budgets, your POs, your license servers. And you can do that in a spreadsheet. An Excel spreadsheet will allow you to capture all that information, but then you have to ask, how's that enabling you to centralize and share the information? There may be even a way to do that too. But the key is to try to get all this information in one place and be able to share it, particularly if you have multiple vendors. We'll talk more about that in a minute. On the area of usage monitoring, so there's the asset or inventory management and vendor information side of the problem, and then there's the usage monitoring side of the problem. And you can try to build your own tool to do usage monitoring. It's not rocket science. I mean, we did it, but if you know enough about it, you can create a usage monitoring tool with some very crude usage reports yourself. Or you can buy a tool on the open market that does usage monitoring, like us. So there's some other ones out there, but you can buy that. Another option for solving this problem would be to use LAM, which stands for License Asset Manager, for tracking all the information that I have up here. It allows you to capture and centralize information about your license inventory, your renewals, your budgets, your POs, your license servers, and all that. That's available from us, Team EDA, and it's a product called LAM. It's pretty inexpensive. Or you can add to that the usage monitoring capability, and now you have one product, one tool for both inventory asset management and for usage monitoring that's totally integrated. We offer that. It's called LAM-UM. So there's 4 ways of solving these problems. Let's look at how in our tool we capture inventory information. One is we capture the vendor name, the tool name, how many seats, date acquired, who you bought it from, the purchase type, be it subscription, perpetual, or some variation thereof, the restrictions of use, be that WAN, WAN US, WAN global, local area network, or node locked. And again, this is captured for every line item. So in our system, everything is captured as a separate line item. And you could have up thousands of line items. There's no limit. But each line item could have these kinds of information. The renewal date on that line item, the cost and associated PO for that line item, any related contracts or documents, and who in your company is responsible for that line item. And then if it is, say, FlexLM floating license, you can also capture for that line item the associated daemon name, port number, license server name, and then if there are associated license files, option files, and debug logs, you can capture the location of those log files as well. So in our system, you can capture pretty much everything you need, and once it's captured, it's available to share. All you need to do is give others the password to get in, and they can get in and see all this information. They can maintain it as well in one place. So under the category of vendor information, you're going to want to know the renewal date for each vendor, and it could be different. Again, depending upon how many vendors you have. If you have 10 different vendors, you might have 10 different renewal dates, and you need to keep track of those renewal dates and be prepared. You need to know who the contacts are for each vendor. Being able to centralize and share that information would be very useful. And then each vendor, you have a different set of contracts and documents. So being able to centralize and share the relevant vendor contracts might be useful. You need to prepare to negotiate. Each renewal, you need to meet with the vendor and determine what's the best course of action. You need to develop a strategy. If you want to effectively negotiate for your best deal, you need to have a strategy going into it. And you need to look at the history of that vendor in advance. So you need time to prepare to negotiate with that vendor. We think, 3 months is a minimum time to prepare to meet with the vendor. And that includes not just reviewing, the history with that vendor, but also looking at the usage of their tools over the last, say, 3 to 6 months to determine your needs. And so you can save money by being better prepared. The other question is, does the vendor allow you to remix? So some vendors do allow you a 3-month, 6-month, 12-month remix option so that you can change the numbers of licenses. It does mean you're going to have to put up a new license key every 3, 6, or 12 months, but you may want that kind of flexibility of being able to change the tool seat mix every 3 months or 6 months or 12 months. And some vendors allow that, some don't. Our tool can give you a warning in advance of 30, 60, 90 days in advance of that renewal date so that you can begin to prepare for your renewal. It gives you plenty of time to also review relevant history of that vendor. You can capture that history in LAM and be better prepared when you meet with the vendor. In the area of budgets, we're talking about saving money, and clearly that's a budget issue. And so you probably have an annual budget for your CAD, CAE, EDA, PLM licenses. I'm assuming everybody knows what I'm talking about here. CAD, computer design, computer engineering, these are your analysis tools. EDA, that's engineering software for electronics and semiconductor development, and PLM, product lifecycle management. You may or may not have a PLM tool, I don't know. But anyway, it's all kind of lumped together into an annual budget. And a general rule of thumb for these tools is about $250,000 per year. Yes, that's US dollars per year for each 100 mechanical engineers. And I'm saying mechanical because if it's electronics engineering, this number may go up to 300 or 350,000 per year per 100 engineers. So electronics engineering tools are more expensive than mechanical engineering tools. On the other side of it would be civil engineering, architectural tools based on AutoCAD and things like that. Those are a little cheaper, so this number could go down to 150 or 200,000 per year per 100 engineers. But a good general rule of thumb is if you have 100 engineers, you're going to spend about 250,000 per year on CAD tools, and that's going to go up or down depending upon how many engineers you have. Linearly. So if you had 200 engineers, it's going to be 500. 300 engineers, it's going to be 750. So again, you need to create your budget around this kind of estimate. This turns out to be pretty darn accurate. Again, if you're a good negotiator, you might be able to get the numbers down a little bit. So it's pretty easy to calculate your budget requirements per vendor. It's simply the cost per seat and the number of licenses you need. So if it's a 3D modeling tool, SolidWorks type of tool, maybe $10,000 or $15,000 per seat, and I need 10 of those. Well, you can really easily calculate what your budget requirements are for that given vendor, and you have to do this for each vendor to figure out what your budget requirements are. And again, if you're downsizing, then you estimate those numbers to go down. If you're growing, then those numbers might go up. You need to build that into your budget as best you can. The other question you need to ask about the budget is there flexibility? Can I move money from one vendor to another? Can I move money from CAD, from some other engineering resource to CAD CAE if I need to, or can they take money out of this for other aspects? So there's got to be some flexibility built into your budget. Another consideration would be historical actual versus budget. You're always you're required to track your actual spend versus your budget. And then a question to you is, how accurate are you? Are you always under budget or over budget? You want to build that into your next year's budget. And then again, depending upon if you're downsizing, your budget should trend down. If you're growing, you should trend your budget up. And then you need to be able to evaluate your vendors from your most expensive vendor to your lowest cost vendor and treat them accordingly. And there's always going to be one vendor that you're spending the most money on, and that's the one that you want to work on the most. And also look at the potential savings. Some applications might allow you to save more than others. So our tool, LAMUM, can help you track budget by vendor, cost per seat, and overall can save you about 20% of that cost per year. Now, whether you want to build that savings into your budget is kind of up to you. In the area of cost per seat, there's going to be really expensive applications, and then there's going to be really less expensive applications. So you need to know that. What's your highest cost per seat down to your lowest cost per seat? And then there's going to be applications where you only need a couple licenses, and then other applications where you might need hundreds of licenses, those with high quantity. And then you're going to have applications where there might be high contention or demand, and people might fight over those licenses. Be nice to know what those licenses are. So for the high cost per seat licenses, these licenses can cost $100,000 per seat, and there are applications out there that cost $100,000 per seat. You need to really be very focused on, how do I control checkout time? How do I avoid hoarding? Because you can't afford to have that really expensive seat tied up and it's not being used. For where you have a lot of seats, high quantity of seats, yes, you need to be able to control the quantity. But you need to look more about the license type. What's best, a LAN, a WAN, or a node locked? Some licenses are very inexpensive, and if you need a lot of them, it might be cheaper to just buy a bunch of node locked seats as opposed to a LAN or a WAN. A LAN is useful if all of your engineers are in one time zone. If you have your engineers in multiple time zones across multiple regions of the world, perhaps, then the WAN begins to look more desirable, but it is more expensive too. So you need to do some trade-off analysis between node-locked, LAN, and WAN to determine what's the best mix. And then you might need to balance. So you might end up with where you have a lot of seats, you might put them on multiple license servers. So I have one license server for the US, I have one license for Europe, I have one license server for Japan, whatever the case might be. You're going to need to balance the license quantities across those servers. You need a tool to help you do that if it's applicable. So our tool can help you track cost per seat, provide chargeback reports by engineer usage as well as group usage, and it can show you usage by server, so that if you do need to move licenses from one server to another to kind of balance it a little better, we can help you there. Another factor is the number of engineers. How many engineers use what applications? That'll help you to determine how many seats, and it's not exactly an equal. If you have 100 engineers using one application, you don't need 100 seats of that application. So again, you need to trim that back down and find out what the average checkout time is and some other things. Average checkout time will help you determine how many seats you need. And then you also need to look in terms of engineers. Are your engineer staff going up, down, or is it steady? Is it flat? Right now, wait times are, it might be going down. And if it is, you might need lesser licenses than you think you need, because your engineer demand is going to go down. So it would be helpful if you talk to somebody in management about the staffing plan going forward. Is it going up, down? Is it mechanical engineers? Is it electrical engineers? Because that'll help you determine what applications and how many seats of that application you're going to need going forward. And you can map that into your yearly budget. Another factor might be, do you have restrictions of use or permissions of use? Some companies use the option file, which is part of a FlexLM functionality that you can actually put in the option file who's restricted or who has permission from using certain licenses. And if you do have that situation, you need to have a system or a tool that can help you deal with the option file part of this. So again, our tool can provide a complete set of usage reports by engineer and by application and help you determine what's the best mix that you need. In the area of usage, this is where things really get interesting. There's a number of ways of looking at usage. You can look at current checkouts and get a lot of valuable data. You can also look at history of usage, and there's literally thousands of ways of looking at history by different time periods, different tool names, different server names, locations, engineers, groups. There's lots of ways of looking at historical usage, and we'll touch on a few of those in a couple of minutes here. And then how do you generate these reports? In our tool, there are three ways: interactive, on-demand, or batch reports. Let's see, I already talked about this, hundreds of ways of looking at usage. Pick the graph or table. Yeah, some data is better shown in a graph. Some data is better shown in a table, depending upon what you want to see. And we've sort of helped you, through that, because you can get either graphs or tables for whatever time period that you want. And these are all the predefined time periods that you can get here, plus any custom time period that you choose. So in our system, there's three ways of creating usage reports. Interactive, which means you just kind of go in and look around, browse around until you find the report that you want using various criteria. The second way is what we call on-demand reports, and these are reports that are commonly used. You're going to be going back to that report commonly, but you don't know when, infrequently. And what you want is just be able to click on a link, hyperlink, and generate the report really quickly and with the most current data in it. So there are browser favorites, so that report can be saved as a favorite in your browser, just like you would save any favorite in your browser. We also have a favorites tab. So in that, you go to the tab and click on the report that you want, and boom, it pops up with the most current data in. And then the third way is using what we call, this is an offline user dashboard. I'll talk more about user dashboards in a minute, but it's the same concept. It's a hyperlink that takes you to the report that you want on demand with the most current data in it. So this is the second way. And the third way is batch. Batch is just, these are routine reports that you want to get automatically, weekly, monthly, quarterly, and they show up either as an email or they're deposited into a specific folder. And we provide all three. Certain reports, I'm not going to take the time to go through that now. Some reports are better set up as on demand, and some are better set up as batch. So let's just take a quick look at some of the current checkout reports that are available. There's the Colorcoded Overview page, which is basically a table. It shows everything that's currently checked out, how many licenses you own, how many are in use, are any reserved, and this is percentage of capacity. So you can look at the color-coded and see what's near capacity. Like we got 9 out of 10 of these MATLAB licenses already checked out. You can sort any of these column headings. Just click on the column heading and it will sort it from highest to lowest or lowest to highest. You can filter any table by just typing in a few characters into this box here, and it'll get you to exactly where you want to be. So this is the current overview, current checkout overview. We also have the current checkout gas gauges, and this is like gauges in your car. Each of these is a separate tool, shows the capacity, it shows how many are checked out, it's color-coded by percentage of capacity, and then this little blue here will get you to the detail. So this detail is a table, and it shows you everything that's currently checked out, the name of the person that has checked out, how many licenses you own, how many are in use, the machine that the license is being used on. This is the client machine. And then how long has it been checked out for? This is the most important column here. And you can click on the column heading, sort it from longest checkout to shortest checkout, and you'll see right away if somebody is hoarding or camping on a license. This is how you can find out if somebody's, well, there's another way, the long checkout alert. But this will give you information right away as to how long these licenses are being checked out by each engineer individually. And if I want to know more details on that particular engineer, I just click on their name and it pulls up a window from Active Directory, which gives you their information, office, department, organization, and their email address and phone number. So if you needed to contact them for some reason, you have that right here in your Active Directory information on that vendor. So this is a perfect report to set up on demand. I need to go click on, every now and then I want to go click on the current MATLAB checkout status. I click on that hyperlink, again, either as a favorite or in my user dashboard, and it brings this table up with the most current information on it. And it gives you a real efficient way of looking at current checkouts. So there's the gas gauges, the overview, and then the details. Those are the three kinds of reports for current checkout. Looking at history, again, there's hundreds of ways of looking at history. There's graphs, there are tables. Depending upon the kind of report, we can look at each. We'll just take a look at a few reports. So this is a history graph. It's essentially this. You can set this for 7 days, 30 days, 90 days, whatever time period you want. This happens to be 7 days. But you get the dotted red line, that's your capacity. And yes, that will go up or down if the capacity changes during this time period. The header gives you the actual time period, and it gives you the name of the tool that we're looking at and the name of the server that we're on. This is the actual, and we have a dynamic interactive cursor. So as you move your cursor around, it gives you the actual value at that particular point. And then this dark blue line is your average. And this is a JPEG image. If you want to capture it as a JPEG, you can save it, copy it, paste it, forward it to other people, whatever you want to do. It's just a JPEG image if you click that button. And you can see real quickly that we're hitting max a lot in this example here. In your world, you might see that, oh, we never exceeded 8 licenses in that time period. You can visually see what your maximum use is. And we own 15, maybe we can get rid of some licenses by looking at that. So these reports are very, very helpful. And we have this thing called auto scaling. If the usage is very low and the capacity is really high, you need to click the auto scaling button to see the actual. We can also see top 10 users. This is where you're going to see if you have a power user using a WAN global license, because this gives you the top 10 users of this application in this given time period, both in terms of total time of checkout and in terms of the number of checkouts. So again, this is important if you're looking for power users. This is the way you can visualize the checkout behavior of a certain license. So in this case, you've got your 7 days of the week, you've got your 24 hours in the day, and this visually will show you in dark red where you're getting the most intense checkout activity. And that fades to light red, yellow, and blue. Blue is no checkout activity. So if you want to, this gives you a better sense of distribution of use. The engineer can look at this and say, well, look, there's all this blue availability. If I ever need a license, again, we're effort to try to make the engineer more productive. Let them know when the licenses are most likely available and when least likely available. So the dark red may be when they're least likely available for checkout. We do the same thing for denials. If you are tracking denials, we'll show you the day of the week and the time of the day when you're getting denials. This is how you look at concurrent use. Again, concurrent floating licenses are like books in a library. You want to know what's the percentage of time that we had 10 licenses checked out. Only 1.5% of the time did we have 10 licenses checked out. So that's a 1.5% probability of denial. That's very expensive. Again, you want to get rid of up to 5%. So this is a 24/7 view. We also do a Monday through Friday 8 to 5 view of concurrent use. But again, for making a decision on how many floating licenses you need, this concurrent use graph is going to be very, very important. I mentioned this earlier, you need to know what's not being used. So this is called the zero use report, and it'll show you every feature or tool that in a given time period was never checked out. And some of these you might not care, but there might be something in here that you do pay for, and if it's not being used, well, you can get rid of it, or you can let the engineering manager know, and maybe they want to do some training on it. So it's very important to know what licenses that you have that you're paying for are not being used. We can do reports by individual engineer. We can do reports by groups of engineers. So if you're going to do chargebacks by group usage, and what's a group? A group can be a project team, a site, a lab, a manager's name. You create your groups, and then you can see usage by group. So this is a usage by an individual engineer. All we did is type in a few characters, and we picked the engineer, and we said a time period, and then it gives us a list of everything that engineer used in a given time period. And it is a table, so we can sort by clicking on the column headings. We can filter it using the filtering box, or we can dump this out to Excel. This is a group detail report for MATLAB. We want to allocate MATLAB costs across all the groups. So here we have a bunch of groups. This is how much time they used MATLAB in this time period here. And we have a percentage of total. You could dump this out to Excel and use these percentages to charge back if you need that. This is a common denial report. It's a table. Shows you who got denied, how many times, when they got denied. It even gives you the denial code, so you can filter on a denial code, and you really only want the -4000 class error codes, because that's the ones that have to do with license number of users already reached. And you can get rid of all the false denials. We can do denial graphs, which shows you basically the number of denials per day on a certain tool. Combined feature is only required if you have the same tool running on multiple license servers. So we have this tool NX13100N running on the blue server and the red server. That's described down here in the footer. And the black is the combined total. So this gives you a sense of whether you need to move licenses from one server to another. Do you have too many in total? This is a very valuable report if you have the same tool, same feature running on multiple license servers. Multiple feature graph is used if you want to see different features at the same ported host, same license server, and are those features used concurrently? Or so correlation of use. This would be a helpful report if you want to see correlation of use. So at one particular ported host, we have 15 different features, and then we just check off the features that we want to plot together here and give it a time period, and it gives us a nice little graph here. A lot of times you just want to be alerted to something automatically, and so again, I mentioned earlier, you want to be notified on your contract renewals, your vendor renewals in advance, 30, 60, 90 days in advance. So that's one of the expiration alerts that we have. But we also have an alert set to watch the license key expiration date, and you can get an alert on that 15 days in advance, 30 days in advance, whatever you want. We have alerts for demon down. We have alerts for at capacity, meaning all licenses are checked out. We have alerts that you can set up for any given tool. You have a real expensive tool I mentioned earlier, and you want to limit the amount of time somebody can have that checked out for. Let's say 8 hours is the limit. This will give you a warning if somebody exceeds the 8 hours. And then license available. This is an alert for the engineer to use if he can't get a license and he doesn't want to hang around waiting. This will just, as soon as the license frees up, it'll send them an alert. And then this is where you would set up your weekly, monthly, quarterly batch reports. Pretty simple. The URL that creates the report goes here. You give it a nice name, and then how often do you want it? Weekly, monthly, quarterly, and then how do you want it delivered? By folder or by email. It's very simple. This is a dashboard concept here. So each of these is a hyperlink. Underneath here is a link that takes you to that specific report and gives you the report with the most current data in it. The dashboard itself is just a document. It's just a placeholder for the hyperlinks. And of course, you need to be able to rename the hyperlink to something user-friendly, which is what we've done here. This happens to be PowerPoint. You can do it. But your dashboard could be a SharePoint document. It could be a Google Doc. It could be a company wiki. It can be a PDF. It can be a Word document. Anything that can handle hyperlinks and where you can change the hyperlink to something more user-friendly. And that's basically a dashboard. And you can have different dashboards for different people. So this is very powerful implementation for on-demand reporting. So in summary, this is a very comprehensive tool. It allows you to do both inventory asset management, although we do have the LAM only. If you're interested only in the inventory asset management piece, that's LAM only. But if you want to add the usage reporting, that's LAM UM. We have on-demand reports we talked about batch reports, we talked about alerts. We also have the ability to do feature name aliasing. So the vendor gives you a license file full of feature names. All of the usage reporting is done by feature name. Some of the feature names are very good, very understandable, they're user-friendly, but some of the feature names the vendors use are not. So this feature name aliasing allows you to change any feature name to something more user-friendly. The tool includes a Flex LM daemon manager so that you can deploy, start, stop, restart Flex LM daemons. You can edit license files, option files, and debug logs with this tool. And if you're using option files, we have built-in syntax checking. So we're almost to the end here. So where do you get the savings? I mean, we've been saying you're going to save 20% with this tool. How do we get that? Well, first, knowing accurately what you have is a good place to start. Being better prepared to negotiate with the vendor, you'll probably get a better deal with the vendor. Tracking actual, average, and trends of usage will help you determine, do you need more or less or a different kind of license? Maybe you can downgrade from a WAN to a LAN or to a standalone and save money that way. Using the zero usage report to identify tools that aren't being used. Improving efficiency of your engineers by giving them a user dashboard, the heat maps, the long checkout alerts, the license available alerts. That's going to improve engineer efficiency. And then by tracking true denials as opposed to not overreacting to a denial claim, which typically will happen. An engineer will claim, I can't get a license, and they'll run to management. Management will just go buy more licenses, and that's not cost effective. So we can help you identify the true denials. So that's pretty much the presentation. By the way, this is recorded, so you'll be able to see this or have other people view this presentation, this session, up on our web once it's posted. It might be a few days before that happens, and we'll notify you when that's available. So I'm going to jump over to the real product now. So this is real time. I'm using IE. You can use Chrome or Firefox. I'm using Chrome here. I apologize. Chrome is and Firefox are a little better than IE, but you can use IE if you want. There's going to be a URL with a port 8181. That's going to be your login page. I don't have time to go through all that right now, but once you log in, this is what you're going to see. You're going to see a row of tabs, expirations, your POs, licenses. This is your usage tab. I'll get to that in a minute. This is a list of all your vendors, and you can drill in and see information in here. This is your list of tools that you have. It's a catalog, if you will, of all your tools. These are all your license servers in here. And these just happen to be standard one-click reports for inventory settings, and this is the daemon manager over here. So the licenses tab is the most important. This is your inventory. Each line item, as I mentioned earlier, is a line item. So each of these is a line item. I have 66 line items in this demo, but I have customers with over 6,000 line items, so there's no limit into how many line items. And in this example, we're showing the vendor name, the tool name, the associated PO for this line item, how many seats, the program or the type of license it is. You can make up your own names here for tool type. And once you have these established, you can filter your inventory on any of these tool types. And then if it's a floating license, you need the license server name, the daemon name, the port number, the restriction of use, and you can make up WAN, ETZ, LAN San Diego. Oh, these are for just Lab 101, but restriction of use is very, very important for compliance reasons. So you definitely want to know what the restriction of use is. The purchase type is, what is it? Is it perpetual with maintenance, without maintenance? This happens to be a 2-year subscription. These are typically annual subscriptions. This is a line item that's just maintenance. So you can have a line item for anything you want, essentially. And this happens to be the expiration date for this line item and the associated cost for this line item. And then who's responsible for this line item. And again, I can sort by clicking on a column heading. I can also filter, like let's say I only want to see the stuff that I'm responsible for. I can go to filter. I happen to have that already set up there, but so now I'm looking at just the stuff that I'm responsible for. I can dump any of these views out to Excel, XML or CSV. I can also turn things on and off. So, right now, let me just clear that filter. Whoops. I just want to show you one other thing here that you can do by turning fields off. Let's say that I'm not going to be tracking dollars and I really don't care about the PO. Let's just say that that's the case. So under Configure View, it allows you to turn off different fields. So I'm going to turn off the dollars and the PO. And so my view now excludes those fields. So when you log in your name, this is going to be configured to what you want to see. So again, this is all about inventory asset management. And I mentioned earlier that we have this ability, we have a tool or product called LAM. That's what this is. This is LAM we're using right now. Let me jump over to the vendors tab and just kind of quickly show you what you can do for a vendor. So I have a bunch of vendors in this case, and this happens to be a vendor called Cadence. These are all the different documents related to Cadence. These are my notes related to Cadence. So this is where you're going to pick up your history. And past contracts, you could have embedded URLs in your notes, your discount rates, payment terms, who you negotiated with, whatever you want to put in the notes for that vendor is up to you. But this is what helps you prepare for your negotiations. And if you ever need to look at the perpetual contract, the subscription contract, whatever, it's all here for you. This is the address for this vendor. These are my contacts. Again, you've centralized and you can share now the contacts for your different vendors. So this is the applications engineer, the sales rep, the district manager for Cadence, their names, their phone numbers, and their email addresses down underneath. And then this is a history. Every time I've done business with Cadence and I got it in here, you can go look at the old POs if you want and see what you've got here. But this allows you again, to centralize and share information about a given vendor. And in this case, I've got 57 vendors. I don't know how many vendors you might have. Of course, this becomes more valuable the more vendors you have, keeping information straight from one vendor to another. I mentioned tools, that's your catalog. If you have multiple license servers, this will show you a list of all your license servers, where that server is located, information if you want about that license server, who the sysadmin is for that license server in case it goes down, you know who to call. And if I drill in on a server like server 2003, you can see all the license daemons. We have 5 different license daemons on this particular server. The port numbers that the daemon is running on, the vendor name, and a tag is just a user-friendly way of saying ported host. And so that's pretty much everything there. I'm jumping through this pretty quick. So when I click usage, again, if you're getting just LAM, you'll see this row of tabs. That's all you're going to see. And if you get the lam then you're going to have this usage tab, which brings up another row of tabs that have to do with usage. Let's look at the first current checkout overview. So this is the overview table that I showed you, and it gives me a list of how many licenses I own, how many are in use, and then the percentage of capacity. And if I want to see, I've got 19 of these MATLAB licenses checked out. I can click on it from here, and here's the list of the 19 that have it checked out. I can sort from here and sort it from longest checkout to shortest. So the longest checkout, 1 hour, 58 minutes, 31 seconds. That's not too bad. I could click on this guy's name and get all of his Active Directory information or person's name. I also have the ability to remove a license. If I want to pull that license that he has back into the pool, there's a remove button here for removing a license. That's tricky. You don't want to just indiscriminately do that. You do need special permission and credentials to issue the remove command. So and then there's the gas gauges view. This is the same information, but it's showing as a gas gauge. And if you leave this page open in your browser, it's going to update every 10 minutes, constantly updating. So you'll see these little, bars going back and forth, up and down. It's a great way to look at current checkout status. This is a great on-demand report, so that URL up there will take you directly to this view. And if I wanted to look at the detail, I just click on the blue, and it brings up, in this case, 8 people that currently have that tool checked out. So customers seem to love this gas gauge display. And again, this URL could be saved as a favorite or in your dashboard. Whenever you click on it, it's going to bring this up. Or you can leave this open all the time in the background, and it's going to continuously update itself. It's pretty cool. Again, this deals with current checkout status. Looking at history, though, you've got a couple of different ways of looking at history. This is a matrix that shows all the different history reports that are to a given tag. In our world, the different ported hosts. So this is MATLAB on demo. This is MATLAB on demo 2. We have 3 different servers serving out MATLAB here. And if I wanted to see like a history graph on MATLAB on this server, I just do that, click on the MATLAB feature, and it gives me a view of checkout. It defaults to the last 7 days, but I can check 30, 90, any time period that I want. And then I'm visually looking at the history. This is my capacity up here, 15 licenses. This is the actual. And notice my cursor, wherever my cursor is, it's giving me the value at that particular point. And this is the averages down here. So that's a quick look at what we call the history graph. It's a very, very commonly used historical report. If I look at user details, this is going to give me the same information, but it's giving me a list of everybody that used it. So these are all the engineers that used this tool in the last, again, 7 days. And I can click on this and see, like, this guy used it the most, is actually 5.41% of the total. So then there's group details, which would be, again, if I wanted to see how much each group used this MATLAB feature in the last, this happens again, default to 7 days, but in the last 7 days, here's all my groups that I've created. And I'm not going to take the time today to tell you, it's very easy to create groups. You can do them interactively, you can do them by an Excel spreadsheet offline, or you can do them using your Active Directory to create the group. But once you have the groups created, then you can see usage by group. And so group 2 used it the most. It was 14.05% of the time. And okay, I need to charge back based on these percentages here. I can just do an Excel export to Excel and then apply these percentages and get my chargeback figures. So then we have the heat maps, we have the concurrency reports. I could take another half an hour easily to go through all these reports with you. The zero use report, the averages report, that's probably one worth going on. So let's look at the averages report for the last 7 days on this particular, the NX, what we call the NX tag. So in this example, in the last 7 days, we use these 2 tools. That's all from this NX demo to tag. And you can see the average checkout time for each of these tools. You can see the average number of concurrent users, and you can see the number of times that it hit max. So the averages report is kind of cool. It has a lot of very useful information. Again, you can do this for any time period that you select here or any custom time period. And then we have, comprehensive reports that go across all the tags. You have your denial reports. You have your user detail report if I wanted to just see usage by one engineer. This is where you would create your groups, either interactively or from Active Directory or by creating an Excel spreadsheet and just importing it. This is your favorites. So on these favorites, these are all on-demand reports that we previously created. We just saved the URL, gave it a user-friendly name, and if I ever needed to, bring it up, I just click on the link, and it brings up that report very, very quickly. So we've been at it for about an hour now. I wanted to stop at this point and see if there are questions. Does anybody have any questions? Well, I guess not. Then I guess it's probably appropriate to thank you for your time today. And again, we will be posting this session up on our website, and we'll let you know when that's available. And thank you very much for attending. We appreciate your time. You have a good day.